2012 to 2015, there were a lot of stories, veterans going to the VA, and this isn't to bash the VA, it's just the reality of what was going on. And we don't have a bed for you. We're overwhelmed. And so they had no place to go and come back in 30 days. And too many times, there's a lot of stories, parents, garages with the blood stains of their son or daughter because they didn't know what else to do. Yeah. All they knew is they wanted to make the pain stop. Right. It's not that they wanted to kill themselves. That's the only way they knew to make the pain stop. And we don't want to be that. We'll find a way. And there may be some interim thing. Many of the guys that come our way, many of them, probably a little over 80%, will raise their hand saying they have some sort of addiction. So depending on what that is and how active they are in that when they reach out to us, they may need to go into some rehab before they reach us. So sometimes there's a 30-day stint at a rehab facility before they make their way to us. But we're going to do everything we can to get you safe today, and we'll figure it out.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast of military and veterans who refuse to be silenced. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, provide value and solutions, and to change the culture when it comes to mental health within the DoD organizations. Hey, everyone, and thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today's guest is David Maulsby. In 2009, David Maulsby began the mission of the PTSD Foundation of America by walking the streets of Houston and finding homeless veterans, reaching one at a time. As an ordained minister, David brought his love of God, his strong faith, and steady leadership to serve and support our country's veterans and their families. He has provided leadership to save lives and build the organization fueled by his love for this country and those who serve. Today, he serves as the Executive Director of Support and Giving and continues to serve raising awareness and funds to grow the outreach and ministry of the foundation. David, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we get into you sharing a little bit more about yourself and the foundation, if there is one word or a few words you could use to describe how you are feeling going into this recording today, how would you describe that?
Luckiest man in the world.
Love that. Awesome. Well, thank you for that little bit of sunshine before we get into hearing more about you. And I'm going to pass it off to you to share a little bit more about yourself and the foundation and how we got to where we are today.
Okay. Well, David's a boring subject, so I'll keep that real brief. Born and raised in Oklahoma. Met my wife there in high school. We got married after our junior year in college, moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Worked for an evangelist for 10 years, a fellow that was a United States Marine veteran, left two perfectly good legs in Vietnam in 1971. And I traveled a lot of places with him and met a lot of veterans. Didn't ever hear the term PTSD. Never had a conversation with anybody about it. I did have a lot of conversations with some guys who were struggling, particularly some of the Vietnam vets were still really, really angry. And so I had a lot of conversations along those lines through those years. Then moved to the Houston area in 1996 and pastored a church there for about 10, 11 years. And then in 2009, we started the mission of what we do today at the PTSD Foundation of America. And it is two-pronged, really, as far as programming goes. If anybody's heard of us, they've generally heard of Camp Hope, which is the interim housing program that we have. And we can dive into this as deep as you want to or as shallow as you want to. But it is a lengthy program. We advertise it as somewhere between 6 and 8 months. It's very individualized. For some veterans, it's taken a year and a half to complete the program. And that can vary a lot on multiple diagnoses, legal issues, physical health issues, other than the mental health things. It's just a very detailed process, and it's very comprehensive. And it's all free, by the way. It costs the veteran nothing, costs the family nothing. It's peer-to-peer based. We're Christ-centered in what we do. Doesn't mean you have to agree to anything or some creed or be believe what I believe. That's not the point. But that's the curriculum that we use. It's the basis for everything that we do. Everyone's welcome. There's no one turned away because you don't think the way we think. So that's the core of our organization. And I say that our DNA is peer to peer. So in 2009, oddly enough, I began that as a pastor and not an actual a veteran and being a peer, but I was it. So that's the way we got started. And we just tried to hit the streets of Houston, find those veterans that were homeless and what was going on. At the time in Houston, Texas, they were telling us 1 out of every 3 adult homeless persons was a military veteran. I know sometimes people kind of think when they hear homeless veteran, they just mind immediately goes to Vietnam vets. But this was 2009, and I was meeting 24, 25, 26-year-olds who were homeless on the streets of Houston. And it was heartbreaking. And our belief was, if we don't do something, there are not going to be enough bridges in Houston for all these veterans to live under. It was a serious, serious problem. 2012 is when we opened Camp Hope. What we began in 2009 was the one-on-one, let's hear what's going on. Let's deal with whatever the immediate crisis is in your life. Sometimes it was, where they were living, their home. Sometimes it was an automobile issue. Sometimes they needed a job. Whatever that crisis thing was, like, how can we help you with that? And then earn their respect enough to open up about the mental health aspect and start working on the PTSD that way. So we began doing that with just a few guys individually. Then as we had enough of those guys, we started our first groups. And this is the other aspect in addition to the Camp Hope. We run warrior groups that operate much like an AA or an NA or any kind of support group that anybody would be familiar with. Everyone in that group is combat-related PTSD. With some exceptions, we do have some first responders in some of those groups. Just kind of depends on the group and the leadership in the group and how that all works. But everyone in that room has a shared trauma experience. And so we begin to work that way in those groups. Alongside the warrior groups, we would also run and still also run family support groups. And in those family support groups, it could be literally a spouse, a parent, sibling, just a friend that cares and is concerned, and they're trying to learn and understand what happened to my friend, what happened to my mate. So we do a lot of work with family members as well. So those support groups we run in a few different cities across the state and a couple of cities across the country. And we have a virtual one, so anyone, anywhere can connect to the internet and they can join those Zoom groups and be a part of those support groups, both for the vet and for the family. And again, everything we do is absolutely free. We charge nothing. And it's a very intensive program, but we've seen an awful lot of success and some great stories.
That's awesome. So you yourself are not a veteran, correct?
Correct.
So what?
I'm the civilian in the room.
Okay. So what created such a passion in your soul to help veterans and their families?
As a pastor, I've been involved in a number of different mission works. I've helped launch an orphanage, very small way, but I helped participate in that in Zambia, Africa, done some mission work in Ukraine and Thailand, the Philippines. But when I came across what was going on with our veterans, and at the time, the VA was telling us we were losing 14 veterans a day to suicide. And again, that's homeless statistic. And then those are just kind of the two that people sort of gravitate to. But there's a whole host of issues that came from that. So many legal issues and family issues. There was a lot happening in that community. And there's a verse that I refer to when people ask me this question, and I should know where it is. I'm terrible at remembering addresses, but I remember the verse. And it says, "My eye has affected my heart. So what I have seen has changed me. I can't unsee what I have been exposed to in our veteran community and what's happening there." And I've seen as big of a pendulum swing as you could possibly imagine. I've been at the scenes that were devastating and horrific. And I've been at scenes where fathers who thought they would never, ever have the opportunity to speak to their child again, completely be restored into that family unit. I've seen some just amazing things. And, you take the good with the bad, but I've seen so much now, and I've seen what can be when a veteran is willing to do the work, and it's work. I mean, it's we call it skills over pills, and we're not, you can't take medicine. That's not the thing, but many of the guys come in, they're on 20, 30 prescribed medications every single day. And a lot of them don't want to be. Some are just because that's what the doctor told them, and they're still a good soldier, and they just say, yes, sir, and they just take them. Don't even ask what it is or what's it for. But we've had many guys come through. They could barely walk. They were usually in a walker or a wheelchair. And by the time they left, they were skipping out because that mental change, plus there's a lot that goes on. I mean, everybody has PT sure, whenever you want to do it, but everybody does it every single day. So we're getting them active again. Some of them gym rats, they spend a lot of time in the gym, but they're getting exposed to a lot. But seeing some of those changes are just incredible. I don't know if you heard of COVID, happened a few years ago.
Yeah.
But we had a guy come to us from the Atlanta area not long after COVID hit, and Vietnam veteran. He been self-medicating for over 50 years, had a string of broken relationships, train wrecks with his kids, just, I mean, terrible. It's a life that wasn't even a life, just existing. And finally, one of his adult kids convinced him to go get some help. He went to his local VA, which they're in Atlanta, and he was going to a support group that's not all that different from what we operate. And he'd gone there long enough that he'd been able to set aside his addiction. COVID hit, and they call him all and say, you can't come back, which is criminal to me. It's horrible. But 2 weeks later, they had to take him back because he did the only thing he knew to do. He reverted back to his addiction. And if you know anything about addiction at all, that's dangerous. He ends up in the emergency room, then up to the psych ward. And even then, they're trying to get him out of the hospital because he didn't have COVID. So a social worker mentioned to him a 2-week program somewhere. And he said, I've been doing this for 50 years. 2 weeks isn't going to do it. And she said, well, there's a place in Houston called Camp Hope. She said, I don't know a lot about it, but I know it's faith-based. I know it's a peer-to-peer program. He's like, how do I get there? And within 2 days, we had him on a plane and we had him in our program.
You guys pay for the flight?
Oh,
to
yeah.
go there?
Yeah,
Okay.
everything. Cost him nothing. So we got him here. He went through the program. Took him a year to go through the program. But when I talked to him today, and he's been gone now since late 2022, he went back to Atlanta. But he's now restored all of his family relationships, he's raising a couple of his grandkids, which is just, it's so different than where he was, where his family wanted absolutely nothing to do with him. Now he's raising 2 of his grandkids. But he's much better shape physically. And anytime I call him, he just chuckles. And he says, Pastor, he said, I had no idea that life could be good again. He said, I've never experienced a life like this ever. Not even my childhood. Happier today than he's ever been in his life. And when you get to see something like that, like, who doesn't want to be a part of that? It's just the coolest thing in the world. That's why I say I'm the luckiest man alive. I get to see a lot of incredible things take place through our programs.
Something stood out to me a lot when you were sharing that story just now, and it's the fact that you said that this man has already moved back to Atlanta, but you're still in contact with him. And the reason that is so incredible is because I think a lot of programs out there, and I can't obviously generalize because I don't know every program out there, but I know there's a lot of things that don't keep in contact. A lot of programs that, people aren't keeping in contact with people after they leave that program. And a lot of times it's because I'm sure places just don't have the capacity or other reasons, I'm sure there are reasons for that, but there's not always that continuing piece, right? Or like people are still keeping in contact with that person to see how they're doing. And so that really stood out to me. And I think that's incredible.
One of the things that I hear, because we've had over 2,000 vets call Camp Hope home for
Wow.
some period of time since 2012. We've got 70 guys living there right now. One of the things I hear them say often is, I found a new unit. It's this new camaraderie. Because when they left, they all came home on separate airplanes and they all went to separate places. So they lost that. I mean, they lose the identity, they lose the purpose, but they also lost their friendships. And now they're completely alone in a world that they don't understand and feel that doesn't understand them. So that's when the isolation, the anxiety, and all those things start to happen. And that real fast, dark spiral begins to happen. So I've many times, whether it's a Vietnam vet, someone who served in Beirut or wherever around the world 20, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, many times this is the first time I have felt safe since I left my fob. And you hear that, and like, well, that's cool. And then like, no, that's a long time to feel that kind of anxiety endlessly. So it's the camaraderie when they leave our program. Again, many of them have lived here up to a year and some over a year, and they've got a whole new network that they have built and some deep relationships, because it's every aspect of your life. I mean, we are combat related PTSD. You can't deal with that and not deal with everything. So it gets very personal, and yeah, you build some very deep friendships while you're here.
So I do want to dig a little deeper into Camp Hope, because you talked about how some people will be there for shorter periods of time. Some people will be there for up to a year or longer. What is that determining factor? Is there like a specific curriculum? Is it based on people's self-evaluation? And the reason I ask that is because how does someone know, I guess, if they're ready? Sometimes people go through these like 60, 90-day programs that are, dealing with addiction, and they go back to that environment where the addiction was happening and they revert back to it because they're in that environment. But when you talked about that specific story of the gentleman in Atlanta, he was able to go back to that environment and not fall back into the addiction. So I'm really curious what that program entails, and what is it that determines how long someone needs to be there before they can successfully, go back to where they were living before, and have that gainful life where they feel like they're not struggling with what they're struggling with before.
Sure. Well, part of that for that particular gentleman in Atlanta, we have an outreach work there. So we've got 5, I think, staff members there,
Okay.
and we've had probably 50 or 60 veterans come to us from the Atlanta area over the last 5 years. So when he went home, he had a support system built in the area. And one of our staff members lived, maybe 2 or 3 miles from him, and we check on him pretty often when he went back. But we don't have that everywhere. But that was particularly helpful for him. Now, as far as when do we know they're quote unquote graduated from the program? We do have, broken down into groups. Black phase, the first 30 days, black phase, because you're blacked out from the world. All communication with the outside world those first 30 days is removed. We want to get them mentally calmed down, stable, to a place where we can really start to dig into the source of their PTSD. And often many other things are involved with that: moral injury, a lot, survivor's guilt. There's a lot that goes in with that. But that first 30 days is getting them ready. Then go into red phase, where this is the work. This is the meat and potatoes of our program. Once they get through that, there's a yellow phase and then a green phase. Yellow is you're starting to work on your 30, 60, 90 and what's your plan going forward. Green is actually you've completed the program. You're staying on because you're working on, for instance, let's say somebody's been living in the forest for the last 3 years. Well, they have no credit, they have no money. So they can't just take our piece of paper that says they graduated and go lease an apartment. So they can actually begin work or going back to school, gaining income. so that they can save that money and be able to go out and do the things they need to do to live a successful long-term life. So there's a green phase that's very unique. I don't know of anybody else in the country that does anything even remotely close to what we do there. And again, that's all free too. They live with us for free. That costs them nothing.
Wow.
But involved in all that, there's a lot of requirements. There's a lot of work, but there's a couple of hundred volunteer hours. There's a lot of things that go into this is the program. These are the things that you have to do. And when it comes time to, we call them our boards, it's basically our lead mentor staff, the personal mentor to that particular veteran. We haven't talked about this, but while we're peer to peer, we also have licensed professional counselors on our campus. So everyone sees professional counselor at least once a week. Sometimes they see them 2 or 3 times a week, depending on, issues going on. But they work together to evaluate an individual's progress, and then the work that they have to do on here's my 30, 60, 90. And they all have to come to an agreement that this is a successful plan, a way forward for this individual. And it's very individualized, so it's very time consuming. But what works for Joe may not work for me. So there's a lot that does go into that. There's a lot of people involved in that conversation. No one walks out of there really surprised because everybody knows going in how things are going because we work with them all day, every day.
So is there a cap to how many veterans you can serve at one time?
Currently, it's about 80. We have one of our houses under a remodel right now, so we were about 100. So right now we're about 80 because with that house under model. But we have I think about 70 guys living there today. We've made a very strong commitment through the years. We don't want to be the last no that a veteran checks the box, says, well, they couldn't take me.
Right.
So now I'm going to become a statistic. 2012 to 2015, there were a lot of stories. Veterans going to the VA, and this isn't to bash the VA, it's just the reality of what was going on. And then we don't have a bed for you. We're overwhelmed. And so they had no place to go. And come back in 30 days, and too many times. There's a lot of stories. Parents' garages with the blood stains of their son or daughter because they didn't know what else to do. Yeah. All they knew is they wanted to make the pain stop. Right. It's not that they wanted to kill themselves. It's the only way they knew to make the pain stop. And we don't want to be that. We'll find a way. And there may be some interim thing. Many of the guys that come our way, many of them, probably a little over 80%, will raise their hand saying they have some sort of addiction. So depending on what that is and how active they are in that when they reach out to us, they may need to go into some rehab before they reach us. So sometimes there's a 30-day stint at a rehab facility before they make their way to us. But we're going to do everything we can to get you safe today, and we'll figure it out.
And then is this geared towards a specific type of veteran, i.e. male, female, combat, has to have PTSD? I know some programs are very, very niche as to who they accept. Are you guys very niche to specific things, or is it any veteran experiencing mental health crisis or homeless?
For Camp Hope, the interim housing portion, it is very niche. Okay. And it's combat related post-traumatic stress. And it's male. In the very early days, when we had smaller numbers, 10 guys, we tried to open the doors to bring in female vets, and we did. And I would at least like to believe we helped them some, but it just wasn't going to work long term. So it's on our radar, I guess you could say, of something we know needs to be done. And we're either going to partner with somebody to get it done, or we'll just get it done ourselves once we have the bandwidth to be able to do that. But we do serve female vets, contractors, law enforcement, first responders through our support groups. Doesn't necessarily have to be combat related in those particular instances. Well, again, it's all about who's in that group and what they're comfortable with bringing into the group. But if we can't help them, we don't just say, we can't help you. We have grown a great network of other organizations, other opportunities. We would love to help you. We're probably not the best suited to help you, and we're going to help you find that. So Again, Camp Hope, it's all combat related, and all males, any era of war. With the outreach groups, that's got a much broader ability to serve.
Okay. So if someone was fell under that criteria and they wanted to reach out for help, what's the best way to be able to reach out for that help through you guys?
Well, of course, eventually you're going to have to go to the website because there's, we got to know who you are. We got to get your DD 214 to prove who you are and you've been where you say you've been. We've got to, have some paperwork. Uh, Many times the first connection is either a family member or a friend or a court representative, some, veterans court across the country, a psych ward, VA social worker. But we do have a crisis line that's manned, and we tell people this, it's manned by someone who is a recoverer. They are a combat veteran answering the phone. So when you call our number, it's not somebody just reading answers off a screen. This is somebody who's been there, done that, and have come through our program and then received uh, assist training, suicide prevention training, all the certification that they need to be able to answer that phone. But it's a combat vet that answers the phone. That's all they care about, right? When they call, you're going to talk to somebody who's been there, done that,
Right.
and knows exactly how you feel. And they felt alone too when they made the call. But that number and the website are the two main ways people will connect with us.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to have all that information in the show notes for anyone that is listening and maybe wants to reach out and check out that information.
My
I think,
encouragement would be for everyone, civilian, doesn't matter, have the phone number in their phone. And the reason why got an email a little while back from someone. They'd gone to a retail store to pick up some things. They walk out and they see someone that's clearly homeless and said, I don't usually do this, but I went over and talked to them because I thought they might be a veteran. They said they were a veteran. It's like, in a way, it's a little bit silly. He said, hey, have you ever heard of Camp Hope? Like, the guy's homeless. He doesn't have a phone. He doesn't have anything. No. And he said, well, you might want to reach out to them. They may be able to help you. And I thought, I'm thankful that he at least said our name. But what if he had our phone number
right.
in that phone and said, hey, look, I can't help you, but I'm going to press send. I'm going to hand you the phone. And the voice you hear is going to be a combat vet, and they will help you. They'll know how to do it. So I wish everybody would put our phone number in there because you never know when you might come across somebody that needs to talk to us.
Absolutely. And that's actually, I was just going to suggest that right before you said it. So I'm so glad you brought that up because, yeah, just having those resources available. I know a lot of people say, the 988 number is good to have in your phone.
Sure,
And,
absolutely.
just having those resources on hand, you might not always think to pull up a website, or maybe you don't have the cell phone service to be able to pull up a website right there and then. And if someone needs that help, they probably, don't want to sit there and wait for all that information.
Right.
Whereas if you just have it right there, you can help them right on that spot, and never
Mhm.
know, you might save someone's life doing that.
Yeah.
So it really is so important. And so, yes, please make sure you at least save the number in your phone. It takes up a tiny bit of space in your phone at a
Yeah.
maximum or at a minimum might save someone's life. But
Indeed.
yes, thank you for bringing that up. I did want to ask you, when you started this, was your vision to grow it to what it is today, or did you ever imagine that you would be helping people at the level that you are today?
We knew we needed to do some type of housing because, I mean, again, the very get-go, why are you and your family living in your truck?
Right.
Why didn't you go to a mission or something like that? Like, if I go there, they're going to separate our family.
Mm.
We'd rather live in a truck together than separated and not have a roof over our head. So there's a lot of that going on. We knew we would need to do something. Had no idea that we would get to the magnitude where we are today, where we have a national footprint. It's not that we're everywhere, but we're across the country. We've, again, had over 2,000 veterans call Camp Hope home for some period of time. It's incredible to look back on it. And, I tell people, I would love to say we were smart enough to know what we wanted it to look like. But even when we bought the property for our interim housing project, we were looking completely different place, completely different atmosphere, a lot larger space than what we ended up buying. And I'm thankful that we never found the right place for the right right price. Because now with 80, 90, sometimes 100 guys living on our campus, they all have, physical ailments as well. So today we run at least 2 van trips a week, taking guys to our local VA for medical care. And, in Houston, it's about a 30 to 45-minute drive, depending on the time of day you go. If we had bought property where we were originally looking, it'd be an hour and a half.
Wow.
And so the logistics of it all would have just been crazy. I mean, it's crazy today, but it's nothing like it would have been if we'd have picked a place that far. So I tell people, we weren't smart enough to have all this vision, but here we are. And we got thousands of guys who will say Camp Hope or the PTSD Foundation in some way, shape, or form was a part of saving their life.
That's
And
incredible.
it's amazing. I mean, it's like, how in the world did we get here?
Right.
There's a lot of hard work, I'll tell you that. It was,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of people involved in getting us from where we were then. We have in our office at our campus, this little 5-acre campus. It's got 9 buildings on it, 4 housing units. Currently, 5th one is under some renovation. But at the front office, we have a paperclip on the wall, and the paperclip is about like this big. And one of our staff got that for me a couple of years ago. And the story behind that is like, well, what's the paperclip doing on the wall? Like,
For
well, when we
reference,
started.
for anyone listening, how big is this big? So we can visualize.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're not watching this, are we? It's probably 18 to 24 inches.
Thank
It's
you.
it's yeah, it's a big paperclip. And it's in a frame. Looks really, really nice, but it's like a paperclip. But what I tell people is in 2009, we literally didn't own a paperclip. We had a piece of paper that said we were a nonprofit. And we had a passion and a firm belief that what we wanted to do could help veterans. But even then, it was just a theory. But we literally didn't own a paperclip. Now today we have a 5-acre campus. Probably we had to buy it and build it today. Probably $15 to $20 million facility campus. Wow. We have a storage unit that we call our own personal Walmart. We get $1.5 to $2 million of called in-kind donations every year, and it's everything from beef to shoes and socks and toothbrushes, paper clips, copy paper. We get all kinds of things donated to us throughout the year.
Wow.
And you just kind of look back on it and think, well, never would have dreamed this is where we would be today, 15 years later.
Wow.
But here we are. As I said, we're just scratching the surface. I mean, to be honest, I mean, the issue is massive. Studies tell us today that we're losing up to 44 veterans every single day to their own hands. Yeah. And that's a staggering number, 44 a day. And that's a combination of suicide, overdose, number of things, but lost to their own hands, things that were preventable if somebody could have just thrown down some roadblocks to keep them from getting to that. Yeah. But we got a long way to go. We got a long, long way to go.
Absolutely. And it's so inspiring to hear just a bit of that journey. I think I hear a lot of stories from other veterans or people who just want to be able to help. And, some people want to go the route of nonprofit. Some people just want to know what's the best way I can help. And not everyone knows that exact answer. But when you say, sometimes it just starts with that vision or the piece of paper that says, hey, you are officially a nonprofit. And then knowing that that vision is going to grow to something, as long as you stay within that goal of like, we're here to help veterans, and you don't waver from what that ultimate mission is, which is to help veterans, you can grow into something incredible. And so it's absolutely amazing what you guys are doing down there in Houston. I love talking to other organizations that are successfully helping other veterans, because it's really cool to see across the country how many people in their own neighborhoods and their own backyards are doing such incredible work. And I think what I found is that, yes, the national footprint, it is important, but the people that are making these huge differences, especially when it comes to Veterans Affairs, are doing it in their own backyards. And they're helping the people in their own neighborhood. And sometimes it's bringing the people from somewhere else in the nation to you, right? It's not necessarily always trying to branch out and be this huge national organization in every single state. But you're really making an impact. And I appreciate that you came on here to share that impact. And hopefully there's someone listening to this episode today that needed to hear what's going on down in Houston and reaches out for some help. So I think that's the ultimate goal, is to help as many people as we can. Let me ask you, David, how can we find you and how can we support you?
So our website is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, ptsdusa.org. That's also our Twitter handle, PTSD USA, Facebook, PTSD USA. I think we didn't quite get that on Instagram. We ended up with PTSD Foundation, I believe is what we have. But social media is a great way to follow the ongoing projects, fundraisers, different events, a little insight through our social media to what goes on at Camp Hope. And then you can get help. We have two sections, get help and give help. So you're looking for help for yourself or for someone that you know, someone that you care about. Just click on the get help button and there's a whole host of resources and information that they can glean there. Then the give help, so many different ways to give. And it's not always dollars, but like any nonprofit in the world needs dollars. And it's always funny to me because I learned this a long time ago. It's not always the people you think that are going to write the big checks that really do. One of my favorite stories, one of our very first donors after we were about to open the doors to Camp Hope, it's a little 6-year-old girl named Abigail. This was March of 2012, and we opened in May. One of the local news stations came out and did a story we were preparing to open Camp Hope. We had a family there that we had been helping through our support groups, and they were interviewing that family. And this little 6-year-old girl is asking her mom, what's all this about? What's going on? She's trying to tell a 6-year-old girl, some pretty deep stuff. And she says, well, I want to help those veterans. And her mom goes, well, that's really nice. What do you want to do? She says, I want to raise some money for them.
Wow.
I think she set up a lemonade stand, did a couple other things, came out with a jar that had $1,800 in it.
Wow.
And like this little 6-year-old girl that has no way of comprehending, who we were trying to help and what they were struggling with. But she figured out a way to raise $1,800. It's like, that's awesome. I mean, that's just
Incredible.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's how we've built. It's been people doing things just like that. And of course, some major funders as well, but that's how we get there. Everybody doing their part. And many times we have people, put us in their will. We've had a lot of people just when they live here locally, they go to the store and, oh, look, bottled water's on sale. Let me buy a couple extra and I'll throw them in the trunk and take them to Camp Hope next time out and out the way. But with COVID, a lot of people switched over to just buying stuff online from Amazon, for instance, and just shipping it straight to us. So they never actually even touched the donation.
Yeah.
They just saw what our needs. We have an urgent needs list that's on our website. Here's what they need. That's all. I'll go buy some of those and have them shipped straight there. So there's a lot of ways for people to get involved.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think it goes to show that you don't have to be, that super wealthy person to be able to make an impact. I mean, imagine if every person donated $1 to the cause that they were really passionate about. I mean, you could raise so much money that dollar really, it multiplies so fast. And I think people forget how big of an impact even the smallest amount of money can make. But that story about that 6-year-old girl is just, wow. It just goes to show you what's really possible, right? I mean, I think people think often, who am I to be able to make an impact or to be able to help? But if a 6-year-old girl can do it,
Oh yeah,
anyone.
Yeah, what's our excuse? Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean you can't do anything? You can if you want to.
Right.
You can do what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
I haven't given out that phone number yet.
Yeah. Okay. Did you want to go ahead and give that out now?
Wait, it's up to you.
Go for it.
I just want to make sure we get it. 87. There's a lot of sevens. 877-717 PTSD. 877-717-7873.
Awesome. Well, again, that'll also be in the show notes for anyone that just wants to quick copy and paste that over into their phone. If you just want to add that to your phone now, I highly recommend that you do. You never know who's going to need that information, and even just the website too, for anyone that wants to add that additional piece of information. We all have smartphones now. They all can house websites and phone numbers. So thank you so much though, David, for coming on the show today and just sharing the incredible work that you guys are doing down there in Houston and the lives that you're impacting across the nation. I love hearing the stories of how these foundations just started and the passion that they're rooted in and the impact, most of all, that they're making. So thank you so much for being here today. And are there any last words or a piece of advice that you want to leave the listeners with?
Well, one thing that I left out, we're also PTSD USA on YouTube. There's a few hundred short graduate videos, so you can hear straight from the guys. PTSD USA on YouTube. Advice: you don't have to have a piece of paper certification to help someone that's in a crisis mode, or you see them heading to a crisis mode. Like particularly in our veteran community, what I have seen is just a willingness to listen, not judge, and not try to be an answer or be the fix. Just listen and show that you actually do care. Thank you for your service. Some people love it, some people hate it. But hey, I don't know where you've been, but I care. I'm a fellow human being, and I see that you're hurting. Can we talk about it? And just listen. And whatever you do, you can't pass judgment. You can't show you did what? And you can't do that. Just listen and let them know that you care. Like, I don't know that I know how to help you, but I'll help you find somebody who can, if you're willing to give me the chance to do that. Anybody can be a part of that.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. With your support, we are able to increase awareness of the mental health issues affecting service members and veterans today, with the goal of creating positive change. If you got value from this episode, please take 30 seconds to subscribe and share this episode within your own network. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.